Are you a good person? Ask yourself that, seriously. Do you think you are a good person? Most, if not everybody, would probably respond and say, yeah, I'm a good person. And I don't know too many people who would say, no, I'm horrible, I'm an evil, miserable sinner. Probably only the great saints have done that. In fact, one of the things that has been noted once is that one of the great paradoxes of the faith is that often the greatest of saints see themselves as the worst of sinners, and the worst of sinners often see themselves as the greatest of saints. So honestly, are we good people? Are you a good person? Well, the question, obviously, that has to be asked is, what do we consider it to be a good person? Most people who would say that will say, yeah, I'm a good person, I don't murder anybody, and I don't steal. Okay, well, I don't steal cars. I'll steal little things, maybe sometimes I take things from work that I'm not supposed to take. And all right, well, I maybe fudge my taxes a little bit, and I pass off as business expenses things that were personal. So, okay, so I only steal little things, nothing serious, and I'm kind to people. Okay, except if they cut me off in the street or they're mean to me in the supermarket or bump into me with their cart or something, but they have it coming to them. But I'm basically a good person, and sometimes maybe the more we think about it, we start saying, you know what, maybe I need a little room of growth here. And then secondly, how do we end up deciding what is the border between good and not so good? None of us is perfect. We are all fallen human beings trying to be redeemed in the world by the Lord, and every one of us has our sins. And we could be a person who goes out spending 99% of our day living perfectly before the Lord. And then there's that one time that we do something wrong, and does that no longer make us a good person? Probably all of us have somebody in our lives who would say, no, he or she is evil. For what they said to me once or did to me, that person is horrible, and they would demand that we be condemned by the Lord for it. We probably all have somebody like that. Does that person's opinion of us from one instance, which maybe even was out of character for us, automatically determine who we are? I certainly hope not. And when do you get to the point that you say, all right, this person is pretty much a good person. They occasionally do things wrong. How many occasions make us less than good? What is that line between when we're no longer a good person and now a bad person? And when we ask the question that way, we probably naturally compare ourselves to people we know who are worse than we are and say, well, I'm not a bad person. After all, I'm not like that guy over there. That person commits a lot more sins than I do. And we'd be absolutely right. We're not as bad as they are. But then that person could look at somebody else and say, well, yeah, maybe I'm not good as that person, but I'm much better than that one. Look what that person does. And we can go down and down the line, pointing to people who are less or more sinful than we are. And we'd even be able to say, well, I'm not Adolf Hitler. I don't kill millions of people like that. But then Adolf Hitler could point to Joseph Stalin and say, well, I know they say I killed 6 million people, but I'm not as bad as Joseph Stalin. He killed 12 million. And then maybe Joseph Stalin could look for somebody who killed even more people than he did. And ultimately, we are comparing ourselves in the end to the single most wicked person in the world, the person who has nobody else to point to, who says, I am the biggest sinner on the face of the earth. I have done more evil than anyone else, whomever that person may end up being. And in doing that, if we end up that way, we never challenge ourselves to holiness. We give ourselves the contentment of saying, well, I'm not as bad as that person. And sometimes we even start thinking we're good, when in fact maybe we're not. For example, Adolf Hitler thought it would be wonderful. He says he could be canonized the Nazi saint. Imagine that. Even Adolf Hitler thought he could be canonized, that he was a good person. So sometimes we confuse ourselves with things like that, and we keep ourselves from striving for things. I don't like to use the word good or bad with people. We're all created by God in his image and likeness, created for goodness. And we all do some good. How much good do we do? That is the question. Is our life predominantly doing good deeds for the Lord? And when we fall short, we acknowledge it immediately and ask the Lord to forgive us and strive to be better all the time? I think that's a better way to look at it. Are we trying to grow in holiness each and every day? Or do we content ourselves from saying, well, I'm better than all those other people out there? As a priest, for example, I know many priests that I know personally that, sometimes I just pray for them because I see the way they treat their people, and I say, Lord, I hope they realize how they're hurting people. And I could maybe say, well, I'm not bad because I'm not like that guy, what he's doing in his parish. Or imagine if I should say, well, look at all those priests who abused people, and were removed from ministry. I'm not like them, so I'm okay. God forgive me if I should decide to judge myself and my own merits on people who have done extreme sins. Of course not. Rather, I try to look at priests that inspire me, that I know are doing, perhaps in my mind, a better job than I'm doing. Maybe they're not. Maybe I just think they are. But the fact that I see things in their life, I see virtues that they have that I want to attain. And I say, Lord, help me to be like that priest. Some of them are priests I know by name. Others are historical priests. St. John Vianney, for example. St. John Paul the Great, just to name two. And asking the Lord to help me to aspire to be like them. Because the more we are like the great saints and the people that show us how to be holy, the closer we are becoming to Christ. And that's what the Lord is talking about in today's gospel reading. It's a very sobering message today. This is not one of those comforting ones. This is one of those wake-up calls that he has to give us. That sometimes we end up thinking, it doesn't matter what you do. When we die, everybody's going to heaven. And so Jesus is just going to say, come on in. But he tells us in the gospel reading today, no, that is not true. Some people do not go to heaven. And notice the person who asked him, are many people saved? Jesus didn't give a number. He didn't say yes or no, and he didn't say this number of people will be saved. So unlike the Jehovah's Witnesses who believe that only 144,000 people will be saved, misreading the scriptures, the Lord doesn't put it in the terms of numbers, but in what is required for salvation. He says, strive to enter through the narrow gate, for many will try and not be strong enough. In other words, just by saying we love the Lord, just by saying we follow him, doesn't automatically mean we're going to be strong enough to enter his kingdom, that we will be good enough to enter heaven. We have to desire it with all of our hearts. But sometimes we desire heaven with only part of our hearts. And we want to be nice, we want to be good, we want to know that the Lord loves us, but we still love our things of this earth, and we still find ourselves more inclined to looking for comforts here and now than giving our hearts to heaven and remembering the Lord wants to call us into his kingdom. And he wants all of us to get there, but we have to do what he told us to do. And like anything that is worth receiving, it has a challenge to it. Nothing that is good, that is worth having, do we get without any effort. You know the old saying, no pain, no gain. Anybody who goes to a gym knows if I want to be healthy, I have to put a lot into it. I have to eat right, exercise. I can't just go to the gym once every 6 months, and walk a treadmill for 15 minutes and say, okay, I'm perfectly healthy. No, we have to stay with it constantly. And our faith in the call to salvation, the Lord is telling us here, is the very same thing. It's going to take a lot of work on our part, but work towards something that hopefully will be a desire we want to achieve. The best way I can think of it or explain it is, imagine you have a young girl, for example, who loves ice skating. And she loves it so much that she says, you know what, my dream is to be on the U.S. Olympic ice skating team. And that's a noble thing for her to aspire to. Well, to do that, she doesn't just go to the Olympic office and say, hi, I'm here to be on the team. Well, of course not. She may be good, and maybe she'll go around, on a Sunday afternoon somewhere to an ice rink, and she can show up all the other people who are barely finding themselves able to stand up on the skates and are falling down a lot, and here she is doing axles and things. Yes, she's much better than all those other people, but that's not going to be good enough to be on the Olympic skating team. She has to excel at her skills, and so she needs to practice a lot. Hour after hour after hour. And in fact, in order to be good enough to be on an Olympic team, she literally has to make skating the focus of her life. That everything she lives and breathes for is about that goal of being on the Olympic skating team. Because when she is her absolute best and may be good enough to be on the team and applies for it, there are dozens of other young girls who are just as talented as she is, and not everybody makes the team. And she could be fantastic, but one girl was just a little bit quicker or a little bit sharper in one of her turns or spins or whatever it may be, and they get on the team and she doesn't. And then just being on the team, well, you have to go to the Olympics, and now you're competing against all the athletes from all over the world. And you may be wonderful, but there's some girl who's even better from another country who wins the gold, and only one person is going to win the medal. And so we know in order to get to the point to win that, that girl has to be living her whole life for that one goal. I want to win the gold medal in the Olympics. And everything else has to take second place to it. And she knows she has to get rid of anything in her life that would take her from doing that. She has to eat properly. She can't do the entertainments that other people would be doing. She's got to be disciplined to every minute. Well, if a medal in the Olympics would have that much discipline, how much discipline do you think we need to enter heaven, to be perfected? Yes, we need a lot of discipline in that. And none of us can live complacently saying, oh, I'm good enough. I'm better than everybody else. When I die, I'll go to heaven. No, Jesus says it's the narrow gate. And some people will try but not be strong enough to enter. The good news for all of us is that we're not competing against anyone else. We don't have to be better than the other people to get in. God wants everyone to enter heaven. So I don't have to be worried about being holier than you. I just have to be my best. Anyone who is strong enough will enter heaven. But in order to do that, we have to take our spiritual life seriously. And that's the question each and every one of us has to ask ourselves today. Are we taking our spiritual life, our journey to heaven, seriously? Is it the one thing for which we live and move and have our being? Do we breathe? Do we act only about living Christ and entering into heaven with him? I think all of us will be honest enough to say we do some things for that, but we could always be better. And that's what we need to do. And never assume that we're good enough to enter heaven, that if I die right now, I'll enter heaven. Because like many people, we might, as Jesus says, we might try and not be strong enough. And as the Lord says in that very sobering part of it, the door is locked and people say, Lord, open for us. And he says, I do not know where you are from. I don't know what you're about. You say, but we ate in your presence. In other words, we came to Mass every Sunday, and you taught in our streets. We listened to you. So just coming to Mass every Sunday doesn't guarantee that we're going to heaven. It's a necessity. It's one of those absolutely foundational things, but it needs to lead us to make sure that every moment of our life is lived trying to grow closer to the Lord and doing his will, being Christ present in the world, so that if people meet us, they should feel as if they have met Christ himself. And that is a struggle that you and I will never complete here on earth. It's something we work on each and every day and will only be perfected when ultimately we go into heaven. But hopefully we want to be there. And do we desire heaven enough? We should all want that and say, no, that's the one thing I need before anything else. Because we know very well if we don't enter heaven, well, when we stand in judgment before the Lord and on the last day, if we're not in heaven, there's only one other place we could be. And we certainly don't want to go there. So yes, the stakes are high. The good news is the Lord wants all of us entering heaven. But anyone who doesn't enter heaven, it's his own fault because we did not follow the Lord completely to the best of our ability. And so the Lord gives us a very sober challenge today. And the challenge is, look in your heart and see, are we working and living each and every day with our whole mind fixed solely on going to heaven, making sure that we do everything we can to enter heaven and that we would suffer any misery, any torments, any tragedies, any horrors possible rather than lose heaven, and that we would give up even the things that seem to be the most important things to us if we know they're keeping us from our goal of heaven. My brothers and sisters, may our desire today be that all of us will strive only to want to enter heaven and be ready to enter the Lord's kingdom when we die and stand before him, so that we will not be like the people that the Lord talks about in this parable, that they will be wailing and gnashing their teeth when they see themselves locked out while all the saints are in heaven with the Lord. That we will not be one of those people left out, but that when we stand before the Lord, he will say to us, well done, brave and faithful servant. You did everything in your power to enter my kingdom. You are strong enough to enter through the narrow gate. Come and share my glory, because you put your treasure in heaven. And where your treasure is, there is where your heart was. Now come and share my joy for all eternity. May Jesus Christ be praised, now and forever.